So again, thank you everyone for joining. My name's Mike. I lead the partner success team at Rec Technologies. I'm in our office in San Francisco right now where we're based. I'm really happy to have two great guests with us today to cover the topic of how to handle sort of pickleball and the surge of pickleball across the US, and how Parks and Rec departments can handle a new activity getting so popular so quickly. So we know this has been a really hot topic for a couple of years. We've seen it in our position of helping cities through technology, how to manage this surge in popularity and both, balance responding to a really vocal community that's interested in this sport, but also, being reasonable and setting reasonable expectations for how quickly a city can respond to a sport, 10xing, going 10 times in popularity overnight, it seems like. Um, so yeah, what we want to cover today is basically some strategies from, I can share a little bit from what I've seen working with about 40 cities across the US and implementing software to manage their racket sports facilities and programming. We have Jon from the city of Watertown, Massachusetts, and we also have Brooke from the city of Milford, Connecticut. So I'll kind of wrap up. That's kind of my quick intro here. So I guess the perspective I can give is a cross section of about 40 cities that I've worked with across the US and how they've handled racket sports. But then I'd love to go through a quick introduction for both of our other speakers. So Jon, or goes more by Kaz. Kaz, could you give a quick intro on your background and where you're from?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jon Kazanjian. Everybody but my mom calls me Kaz these days. I'm the Assistant Director of Recreation here in the city of Watertown, Massachusetts. We're a city of about 35,000 people jammed into 4.5 square miles. We're just outside the city of Boston. Our recreation department offers a wide range of programs, everything from youth sports, summer camps, adult programming and leagues and sports, senior programs, and of course pickleball. These guys asked me to say my favorite sport. So favorite sport as a fan, as someone that likes to play it, baseball. I'm a lifelong fan and actually just accomplished visiting all the major league stadiums a couple
Nice.
weeks ago in Texas. And favorite program to run is Adult Recess, which is an award-winning program that I brought to Littleton, Mass before I moved here, in which we do something every week, and I'm kind of like the hype guy, the ref, the rules giver, and it's just been a fun program to be part of.
And then what was the second best stadium, since Fenway is obviously the best baseball stadium?
Probably Old Tiger Stadium. Loved it.
Okay.
Loved it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm sorry. Yeah, I gave myself away, but I'm originally from the Boston area, so yeah, still loyal to the Boston sports. And then
Right.
Brooke, same question for you. If you could please introduce yourself and share what your favorite sport is, either to play or to run programming for as a Parks and Rec department.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Brooke. I'm from Milford, Connecticut. This is my third year working at the recreation department here doing the marketing and communications. We are a small coastal city, about an hour and a half from New York City. We have a population of about 50,000 people. We have tons of pickleball courts, so that is a huge thing. We also do tons of summer camps, youth programs, adult lessons in different leagues all year round, outdoor, indoor. We run the beaches and different facilities. So we do a lot here in Milford. And I would say my favorite sport right now would be tennis. A few years ago, my friend and I just wanted to learn, so we just went down to the courts and taught ourselves. And it helped that the tennis courts were more available than the pickleball courts.
Common theme.
Yes.
And yeah, I guess we'll kind of roll into the first question for you then, Brooke. Pickleball, I guess setting the stage, pickleball has grown faster than maybe almost any other recreational activity in the last 5 years. Huge boost from the sort of COVID era and people getting forced outside to learn a new activity. What has been the approach of Milford to handle this big surge in pickleball popularity? Like, what are some of the ways you've responded to the community when they've asked for more access to either pickleball facilities or programming?
Yeah, I would say a big thing is just listening to the community and hearing what they want and trying our best to fit their needs and their demands. So we have in Milford, we have 33 courts. We have 18 courts strictly for pickleball, 14 of them have lights, 10 for strictly tennis, all with lights, and then we have 5 more tennis courts that are all lined for pickleball. So the newest facility is Eisenhower Park, where we have 8 tennis and 8 pickleball. And we started by offering lessons. So we would do either month-long lessons, different session ranges and all different levels for beginners to experts. We'll do one-day clinics, and then we even offer a open play program. So we looked at what were the most popular times that like the same group of people were going to play, and we put together an open play program. We have close to 600 members this year and over 200 day passes sold. So they play 4 hours a day, 4 times a week at all 8 courts at Eisenhower Park. And then we just listen to their needs. So if they want to play earlier, or they want longer time blocks, or they want the nets up all winter, we just listen and we see what we can do.
So I want to follow up on the open play question because I think this is really unique to pickleball and something a lot of cities have to manage. So for those less familiar with it, pickleball kind of organically, I don't know how this happened, has developed a sort of culture around an open play where a lot of players, you'll set aside a certain number of courts. So say give them 4, 6, 8 courts, and then they rotate matches around those courts. So like I've gone to play in some of the open plays in San Francisco or other cities we work with. And it's really cool in sort of the community that it builds. You know, the same, let's say 40 to 80 or 100 people in a rotation will show up. It becomes, you know, I see people bringing like coffee and donuts. There's like side tables, like very social. And I think, you know, as part of the mission of Parks and Rec is community building. I see it as a really awesome community, especially for seniors. I know you mentioned like, you know, they're part of that group advocating for the open play. They maybe, you know, didn't have as much of a social outlet or outlet for exercise before, and the open play is a great way to do that. On the flip side, open plays also can cause some pain for cities in that a lot of people show up. They use all the parking. Pickleball is really loud, right? Like if it's near residences and there's 80 people yelling and hitting pickleballs that are loud, that can cause friction with the community nearby. So we've seen this challenge where you kind of need to balance. You want to facilitate the open play. It's such a nice community that's being built, but you want to make sure the hours don't get out of control. And I wonder, like, how did you feel like you felt a good balance, or you felt you just kind of, when the community asked for more hours, you just sort of gave it to them to keep them happy?
No, I think so. The program leader that created this pickleball program, he worked with the leaders of the residents that wanted this program, and he worked with our director and just tried to find a happy medium of everyone. I think parking is a big problem and we do now staff someone down at the courts for that program.
Okay.
They kind of run the whiteboard. So when people show up, you can come up with your friends in a group of 4, or you can show up alone to the open play. It doesn't matter. You go up to the whiteboard, you put your name on the next available spot, and our staff keeps it moving and keeps filling in the open courts as they come.
Yeah. So I'm just comparing to other cities I've seen, you have more facilitation by the city to make the open play run smoothly, which I think if you have the resourcing for it is a great approach. Not
Mhm.
everyone has staff they can afford to send down to the court to actually run it.
Yeah.
So, you know, are you also, it sounds like you're doing some pre-registration. You said you're selling day passes for these open
Mhm.
plays.
Yes. So this used to be done, people could pay in cash. We no longer accept cash. And I think maybe last year, the end of last year, and then definitely this year, we started with the staff down there. So it hasn't always been like that, but I think they were lacking structure, and that's what we decided. If we had a staff down there, then they could help run the program better. So yeah, we offer the program. It runs April through November, $25 for residents and $100 for non-residents. We also have a limit on how many non-residents can join. And
Got
then
it.
we have a $5 day pass. So a lot of people have friends, family visiting from out of town, and they want to bring them. So we offer that. They just have to buy it the day before, morning of, and then just show the staff member.
Yeah, I really like that approach because then it does put some headcount limit to the total. You can say we have this many like season passes, this many day passes, and then you have some control over. There's not going to be cars spilling out into the neighborhood outside of that. So yeah, I think whether you have staff or not, thinking about using some pre-registration for open play could be a good way for crowd control and giving people some predictability. Um,
Yeah.
And then going over to you, Kaz, I know you're kind of earlier in the pickleball journey. You don't have all of the facilities built out, but how are you responding to the surge in demand in Watertown?
Yeah, we were surprised about, how anytime we've offered a change or something new, pickleball related, like we just added an instructor. It just shocks me how quickly the registration gets filled up or goes right to the wait list almost instantly. And we have a pickleball league and we get people to sign up by teams. But we have an open play in our structure, and I'm writing a lot of notes down from Brooke because we don't do membership. We just do like a program, sign up for 6 weeks of pickleball open play, and that's where we limit our numbers, regardless if they show or not on those nights. And it definitely limits us for the ability to really expand that program, especially that we don't have any pickleball dedicated courts. One of the things that this registration rollout did with us, and we just joined Rec Technologies, is it showed us, like our percentage of registrations was like 50% pickleball related. So our capital improvement plan had had pickleball courts kind of on the skirts of our 5-year plan, and we definitely need to reevaluate and are looking at reallocating some capital improvement funds that are available now to see if we can get this thing kind of fast tracked, because it's just shocking how just it's taken over. And we got a phone call the other day from a citizen that of Watertown that I took, and they basically said this: I have nowhere to play when I get out of work. So it's just those needs and wants that we're just not being able to fulfill, and managing those expectations by all of these things are where we're at here in Watertown, at least.
Yeah. And I think the speed of the increase in popularity is unique. And that, we were just talking a little before this, most capital improvement projects might be on a time scale of 5 to 10 years out, but the community is expecting you to respond in months or maybe a year. And so, yeah, it helps. I think it really helps to have that data to back it up and say, here are registration numbers. It's all selling out. Here's the size of the wait list. Here's like how much the few courts that we have are being booked. And I just wanted to share on my screen. I want to answer one of the questions from Brad as well about the public calendar. Just want to show, I think there's a couple types of data sets that could be really helpful if you need to sell, say, your city manager, city council, or whoever's making the capital improvement decisions, because they're going to want to see some quantifiable data like, well, how in demand is this? So I think program registration numbers are really good. This is a model. So we help manage all of the tennis and pickleball court reservations for the city of San Francisco. So each of these rows is a different court across the city, and we help them model out, what percent available is that court in that hour across the week. So what you're seeing here in this column is at 10:30 a.m. at this court, it's 87% used. There's only 13% of time available. And then they can use this sort of heat map of court reservation utilization to go and say, like, okay, we're like clearly hitting our limit, to the point of the story you're telling about someone coming to you and saying after work, which is very common. You can see the after work hours is like all red because everyone wants to get off work and play. I think when you have this kind of data on your reservations, it really helps make the case to speed up the usual speed of capital improvement. There's also some ways you can get creative. I've seen other cities. Now, the pickleball community will say this is unacceptable, but you can also, we've seen people do the dual line courts like this, or take like a basketball court and throw lines on it and have the sort of temporary rolling nets as well. So there are some ways that you can, within 6 months, quickly get a couple more courts while you work on more long-term capital improvement projects. And then I saw a question from Brad about how are you showing on the calendar the different open play versus not. So this is just a city that works with rec here, looking at the calendar. So 2 things I want to point out here is kind of examples you can use to let the community know what's available. One is in these dual line courts. If it's a tennis court or pickleball court, you could use the calendar to say whether that dual line court is either first come, first serve or reservable for pickleball or tennis. So that's what you're seeing here as I'm switching between the two, is there's overlapping courts. So court 3 would be a tennis court, 3A, 3B are the 2 overlapping. And they can then tell the community which one is first come, first serve for tennis or pickleball. And then same thing for open play, to your question, Brad. They'd be able to tell them in advance, like Brooke was saying, Monday through Thursday, these hours are open play. So you either pre-register for the open play or don't go during that time because the courts are going to be really busy. I want to move to our next question we had here, and I'll start with you, Brooke. When did you know that your previous system, whatever it was kind of breaking under the pressure of how much demand there was for pickleball, and how did you solve it?
Yeah, so our old system was a shared Google spreadsheet and phone calls between all 6 people in our office. That is how people reserved courts. So I think at the beginning, when they started taking reservations, that was probably a good system. But over the last year or two, it got out of control. So we had a bunch of guidelines for our reservations, and one was that reservations would open the week before at 10 a.m. So every workday at 9:59 in the morning between April to November, our phones would just go crazy. And just throughout the last year, it got so crazy. And there's just a lot of issues we ran into. Courtney, I don't know if you can pull up the spreadsheet, but just with 6 people all at the same time trying to type on the same document and not block each other out. We also have some other guidelines that people have to be Milford residents to reserve courts. It's free, but we just require that they show proof at the beginning of the season. We limit them to 3 per week per person. So at 10 a.m., when we're trying to accept so many calls and trying to get as many people in as we can, it was hard to fact check if they were a resident or if they hit their limit for the week. So I think it just got out of control, and we knew we needed to change our system. But last year we did make over 14,000 permits that way. So it was just crazy.
Yeah. So I think it's like, I think every city has a subset of facilities and facility permits they might be willing to issue self-serve, which is like the direction that you ended up going. And that's like, picnic tables or maybe courts. And the way we've seen self-serve systems work the best is where, to your point, eligibility rules can be applied. So you can know their residency status or whether they're the member of like a season pass. Like, okay, you've bought the season pass, now you can make a reservation. So you want that applied automatically. And then you want enough information to the public about general availability that they don't still need to call in and ask questions. Because we've seen some cities put in a reservation system, and then if there's not enough public information, like a public calendar or like guidelines when things can be booked, they're still going to call you because they're like, I can't find a court, right? Even if you give them the chance to book. So I think just kind of summarizing this, I just saw the poll. There's a lot of cities in the audience that are just getting started on their journey. I think having a system that allows you to apply the eligibility rules and give the self-serve information of when something's available, can I book it, how many times can I book it per week, all of that will really reduce the amount of phone calls coming into your city. And then similar question for you, Kaz. You had an old system, pen and paper version, and sort of I know we're kind of on this journey with you now, helping you implement the system, but what were you prioritizing improving from the old system to the new?
Yeah, kind of going back to that phone call I took, a lot of people are just not reserving, our facility space as far as tennis courts for pickleball at all, because it's a clunky system. We have a 5-page permit in which it says all the rules and regulations and waivers and such, but it also has the the information, and people would have to look online to see if it was available. Then they'd email the paper in, and we actually had to bring in some additional office staff to help manage all of our facility reservations. And it may not be available by the time we process it. We may have
Yeah.
like 5 or 6 ahead of them that request at the same time. So now we're bouncing back and forth on a process that really should not ever take more than, an hour to sort of issue out a permit for folks. So we had a lot of frustration with the community. We got a lot of frustration with people just going out and using the space without even reserving them. We got people giving lessons and not, paying for that space, turning a profit, and they're, creating their own businesses and sort of just taking over all of our facilities without us having our hands in it, and not really the best, fairest way to operate as a municipality. So, bringing on the system with Rec Technologies, and having, like a Instabook, or at least a request to book option, where we kind of take all that, back and forth. I mean, it's a little comical that the way, we do those permit requests across the board. So we can't wait to get to a system that's electronic, quick, easy, and especially easy for the user to have. And so those are real-time changes that we're making now. That's going to be in place on January 1st for 2026. But it was a crazy process that, honestly, I can't believe we're doing in 2025. But we're excited to be modernizing everything, and this is part of it.
Yeah, I think I want to touch on one point you mentioned about how like you can build this new facility, and then if you don't put a system around it, it just kind of goes like people start teaching on it, people show up, they don't reserve it. There's something kind of cool that happens when you have a very transparent public calendar, which is the community sort of self-enforces the rules a little bit. And this, because I mean, just being very frank, I think it's great that Brooke has some staffing that can be down at the courts, but many of the cities we have cannot afford to have a staff member down there policing, making sure people follow the calendar. And the situation is the same in San Francisco. There's 20 different parks with 80 different courts spread across a whole major city. And when we first launched, we were just kind of worried, like, will people actually respect the reservation system, right? Like, are people just going to get into fights on the court? And it's been pretty amazing how much people have. And the way you pull up the calendars, we just have signage with a QR code, and anyone can just scan it, and then it pulls it up on your phone. And most people are respectful about it, right? It's like they scan it, they see it, people are getting on and off the court. And the fact that it's in such high demand means usually all reservable courts are booked all the time. So it's very smooth. You can see the calendar start and end very clearly at the beginning and end of your reservation, but it requires that transparency. If everything's done by paper form and I can't even see that other people have a reservation, I'm a lot less likely to respect it. So I do think, just like the general theme of transparency to the residents, this is how it works. The rules are fair for everyone. Here's these reservations on the calendar, kind of helps you manage these satellite passive spaces that don't have staffing. And then, okay, we have a question from Diana about how are we balancing pickleball programming with your community? It sounds like, Brooke, you have a fair amount of programming there. I know you're working with some colleagues that run some of the programming directly, but do you know how they came up with the programming? Was it based on community requests?
I'm not too sure how they got started with offering lessons. I do know that the supervisor that runs pickleball, he has one instructor that he works with, and they kind of go back and forth and brainstorm and finalize what programs to offer. And I also saw another question from Annie about different playing levels. I can touch on that too. We also offer each program we offer in different levels. So we'll do beginner to, I don't even know the term, intermediate, and then we do intermediate to expert. They do different levels for either the lessons that are a month long, or for the one-day clinics or the weekend clinics. So they always offer different options for different levels. But yeah, mostly the instructor works and comes up with new ideas.
Yeah, have you thought about, I know you're just getting started rolling out more programming, or you did launch some, you said it sold out. So Kaz, how did you come up with the initial set of pickleball programming you wanted to try first?
Yeah, I mean, mostly the want for it has kind of pushed it. Lack of staff to kind of really be out there running, and has kind of managed that itself. So, we're not able to be out there all the time offering programming. We don't have the staff to do it. We're definitely multiplying that by probably 3 for the fall here. We have I hadn't mentioned it earlier, but we are partnering with our Council on Aging to offer free programs for seniors during the day, during the week. So, adding the pickleball lessons on top of the open play, and the pickleball league kind of rolled out over the winter for the first time. We've really upped our game in pickleball programming, but for us, lack of staff, lack of help has kind of policed we haven't had any pushback from the community saying we don't have a chance to just kind of go play, because we haven't blanketed everything with our, kind of us reserving the space, permitting the space to ourselves. We're about to lose 5 courts, tennis courts that had 10 pickleball lines on them. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with that, to see if there's any pushback from the community about that balance. So, so we kind of policed, it was kind of self-policed with availability of staffing more than anything, honestly, here.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if the balance also, you mentioned like we can't over program it because then it feels like there's no time for people to walk on the court. So Diana, I don't know if that was your question around balancing. I'll just share kind of like broad perspective for a lot of cities. The general split we've seen at a lot of cities is if you had, let's say, 8 courts, you'd go 50-50 on first come, first serve reservable. So let's say like 4 courts are reservable, 4 are first come, first serve. And then we've generally seen them stack programming on the reservable courts. So it's easy to tell the community, look, there's always going to be 4 first come, first serve courts. And maybe those are also used for open play, since open play is sort of like a first come, first serve in spirit type event. And then we'll only program the reservable courts. So it's up. I mean, you don't have to follow that exact model of the 50-50 split and programming on reservable, but picking something clean like that, that's easy to communicate to the community. Like, hey, these are the first come, first serve. These are the learning courts. These are the ones that could, when they're being used, they could, programming is first priority for these courts. When they're not, you can walk on and play. We found having that distinction and even using signage can be helpful. We've had some cities say like, this is the learning section. So you might see a private lesson here. You might see a class happening here so that they don't get upset, because we found when there are authorized instructors, like not the kind Kaz was talking about where they're just showing up and running their business, but you have authorized ones, they get challenged by residents sometimes. They're like, hey, are you allowed to teach here? Do you have a permit? And it can be helpful to have that clear communication that these are the learning courts. Don't be surprised if you see lessons on these courts. And then again, if you have a public calendar, you can show that it's an authorized class. So residents can scan it, say, hey, I see this instructor's name on the calendar. I know this is an authorized class. Okay, some interesting question. I'm going to keep going with the live questions. So Thomas has a question about, do you charge for reservations? I can share a little bit on my side of what I've seen, but Brooke, I think yours are still free, right? Yeah. How did you come to the decision to keep them free versus charge?
Yeah, so it's always been free for residents to reserve courts. We just don't want to charge the residents. It should be just open for them to play. We would like to keep it that way, but I think one way we keep it fair, we keep the reservations only for Milford residents. But other than that, when there's no reservations, there's no rec programs, or there's no events going on, then all the courts are free to use for residents, non-residents, first come, first serve. So anyone can go on and check the calendar, the public calendar, and see, okay, this court is open at 12 o'clock, and they can go play. They don't need a reservation if it's available.
And then I don't know, Kaz, have you thought about whether you want to put any fees into court reservations?
So we actually do have fees already in our
Okay.
system. It's $5 an hour, so it's pretty minimal. That's in response to the fact that we have an outdated paperwork system, and we need to pay those people to come in and assist us, our full-time staff, to process those. So could we move to a more free system as we get like an instant book option, and where it's more seamless and not as much of a lift, where we can all kind of pitch in? That's kind of how we operate in the Northeast. Where recreation, we have 5 full-time staff, and we all answer the phones, we all do permits, we all do program registration for people when they call in. All of us can do everything. So if we're able to kind of go through that process really quickly and seamlessly, maybe the free option is something we should model ourselves after from Brooke. But right now it's just literally to pay for doing the paperwork, the hours spent, and it doesn't even remotely cover the cost of that. It's just to kind of give some ownership from their end, to not just blanket us with permit applications and such. But so yeah, we do add a fee, but doesn't really help on either end of things. It doesn't hurt the consumer, which is good, and it's not something that really funds us to any, like, there's not a huge amount of money that we bring in for specifically tennis pickleball.
Yeah, I'll just kind of give a cross section. I would say prices come in like $5 an hour, 7. The most I've maybe seen is 10. And it depends on how nice the facility is. Some cities will justify like, look, just the maintenance of this facility, if it's higher end, especially lights, we're gonna have to charge you money to pay for that. The other reason to consider fees that I've seen cities doing is no shows. So if you charge $0 and people are willing to just block off, they're like, oh, I might play, I might not, and then they don't show up for the reservation, there's basically no penalty. So as an example, the city of San Francisco started with free reservations. They're now going to implement around like Kaz's example, or like a small fee, doesn't even cover the cost of maintenance and all those courts, but it's enough to make people actually cancel at least whatever it is 48 hours in advance so that they can get their money back and it's not wasted. Because otherwise what they saw is the calendar will show it's booked wall to wall, but then no one's showing up because there's no penalty to not show up. So the fees, not necessarily as like a cost recovery mechanism, but to keep people honest about using a facility that's really in demand, because they were getting a lot of resident complaints saying, hey, like I'm walking up, I'm seeing no one there, but the calendar says it's full, so I feel like I can't use it.
I would just add to
yeah,
that
go ahead, Brooke.
quickly. So we've had those calls before, even with our old system, that courts are reserved, but no one's showing up, probably because they're free and they're not losing anything if they don't show up. With our old system, with the phone calls, it was hard for people to cancel because they can only call when we're in the office, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Now with the online system, people can cancel on their own if they want to. We also, I think these two things kind of help with the no-shows. We limit people to 3 reservations per week. So if this is someone that is wanting to go play 4 or 5 times a week, they're not just gonna no-show because then they lose out on their reservation for the week.
Yep.
They're more likely to go and cancel it and use it for another day. We also have sent out an email to all of our users on the site that randomly our recreation staff will be going down to the courts and performing checks to make sure that they'll print out the schedule for that time that they're going, and just make sure the people that reserve the courts are down there. And if anybody does have a no-show at our random checks, then I think they made a 3, you get 3 chances and then you're kicked out of the program.
Yeah, there has to be some enforcement mechanism. I agree. I wouldn't say like you have to. It's great if you can provide it for free if you have the right enforcement mechanisms. So yeah, that's a great way to do it. Like a quick audit, or residents will tell on each other. Like we'll get emails like, "Hey, I was here and I see Mike K on the calendar as a reservation. Like, where is he?" It's like you can kind of use that as a warning. But no, that's a really good point. I want to segue into a different question because I realize now it was in the headline of the webinar about conflict between the tennis and the pickleball community. So I don't know, Kaz, I'll go to you first. Was that an issue? Like, often I see conflict coming up when pickleball people are saying, hey, that tennis court is empty all the time, turn it into 4 pickleball courts, and then you'll get pushback from the tennis community. But have you run into that issue in Watertown at all?
We've been pretty lucky not having that, I hear a lot of communities surrounding me where like pickleball is the bane of their existence. Even if you bring up pickleball at all, they don't want to hear it. They've had many sound issues, obviously, with residents. But when it comes to tennis versus pickleball, the tennis community, in my eyes, is shrinking. We find that most people are using our courts to play pickleball, even though we don't have any, again, pickleball dedicated facilities. We haven't had any situations where we had to like show up or police or do any of those things here. So we've been pretty lucky when it comes to that. I have heard a lot of other communities complain about that. So unfortunately, I'm not a good example of that, but we do have a pickleball community that definitely is clamoring for pickleball dedicated facilities because, in order to play pickleball on an aligned court, you either have to use the tennis court itself or bring your own net. So it's not the most accessible thing for the community right now because of that sort of hurdle. So I think that would probably be my only conflict when it comes to like tennis versus pickleball.
Yeah, no, it's a good thing. You don't have to have this problem. And I think it mostly comes up. I showed that picture before of like the dual aligned court. is basically the time scale to build new facilities is longer than most pickleball people are willing to wait. And so a lot of cities will compromise by letting them play on the tennis courts. Was there a transition period, Brooke, where you had to do that, or were you able to build enough pickleball courts relatively quickly that you sort of absorbed the demand?
Yeah, I'm not too sure on the timeline of the demand and when they got the courts built. I wasn't here during that time, but I do know like Eisenhower Park in Milford, it has always been 8 tennis courts. And then I'm assuming when the demand for pickleball came up, they had the space to add 8 pickleball courts. So they didn't have to take away any tennis courts.
Okay.
They just went a little bit down the hill and added 8 pickleball courts. And then about 2 years ago, at another location, we had 4 tennis courts. So we kept 2 full tennis courts, and then the space where the other 2 were, we could add 6 pickleball courts. So we still kept the tennis because we still do have a strong tennis community in Milford, not as big as pickleball. And then the 4 other tennis courts, we added lines for pickleball. So I know in the picture you showed, I think the pickleball courts overlap.
Yes. Yeah,
So
I can pull that up as a visual while we talk about it, 'cause it's a very common arrangement.
yeah, so we have the 5 tennis courts that all have pickleball lines. So it's just whoever's there first, they can reserve the court for whatever they want. We don't ask what they're playing. So they can
Yeah.
reserve for whatever they want. I also saw a question about indoor pickleball. We also did the same at one of our indoor gyms that we use for indoor pickleball. We do indoor pickleball open play in the winter. So we painted on one basketball court, we could fit 3 pickleball court lines horizontally.
Yep. And you can get, we worked with another city out here, close to the Bay Area in California that did the same thing for gyms. And I think they even squeezed in 4 courts in one basketball court. That might be a little tight. But that is an easy way if you have a gym surface. Pickleball courts can fit widthwise on a basketball court, and you can stack them 3 or 4. And this is not great. If you can't paint the lines, you can get sets where if you just have a measuring tape, you can put down either temporary like corners to the court, or there's types of tape that don't damage the floor as much. It's not a good long-term solution. You could maybe do it once as like a trial run. I wouldn't recommend doing it over and over. The tape glue does get on the court, on the basketball court. You could also do that. But they're pretty affordable. The temporary nets are not that bad to set up and break down. And we've actually, when we helped them set up an open play, the community members were doing, like, you didn't need staff to do all the setup and breakdown because the community members were organized enough, and they were just so thrilled to have an indoor space during the rainy season here, basically. So yeah, I do think those sort of ad hoc indoor courts are a really good solution. If you want to get really fancy, you can get like extra nets to be barriers between the courts, because that can be an issue where it's somewhat of a safety issue when balls are rolling on to the court next to them. But at a minimum, those like temporary nets are nice. They don't take up a lot of storage space either. I don't know, Kaz, have you considered do you have any indoor spaces you could convert?
The only indoor spaces we use are the schools. So
Okay.
our pickleball league and during the winter is indoors. We do have those corners. They're not ideal, but they are functional enough to make it work. And we're lucky our pickleball league isn't like with a bunch of people that are very serious about it. They're doing it for casual play, and it's for fun more than being very, very serious. So there's no really debate on calls because, obviously you have corners, but you don't have a line between them to really decipher those things. As far as pickleball costs and pickleball nets, I did want to open people's eyes that USA Pickleball, you can become a member for free, and they actually have a grant process where you can get pickleball equipment. It just ended yesterday or the 5th, but I did apply for the one of the pickleball bundles, 4 sets of nets, a bunch of balls and paddles. And I don't know if we've been approved, but USA Pickleball is trying to get the sport to continue to grow, even though it's been growing at an astronomical rate. So that's a way to curb some cost in your community as far as those temporary nets are concerned. But hopefully we get it. But as far as indoor space is concerned, the gyms aren't ideal, but that's all we have. But people still come and play. They don't care. They just want a place to play.
Yep. And then this is pretty specific to facilitating open plays. So maybe it's a question for you, Brooke. I'm not sure. Jennifer was asking about, and I saw another question about paddle racks. Do you use, it sounds like you use a whiteboard system to queue up the open play, not a paddle rack.
Yes, so at the open play, we do a whiteboard system. We do also have paddle holders. I don't know if that's the same thing, just for people to put them when they're not playing, but not as a reserve your court or I'm next in line kind of thing, just at the courts for people to use.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
we
think
just
those
added,
boards work
oh, sorry, Mike.
perfect. No, no,
I
go
just
ahead.
said,
Go.
we just added those racks. We bought them on Amazon. They come with 4 sets of 4. Like, so you have, so you can reserve the courts that way. Seems to really help us. We didn't do a whiteboard system in open play. People just kind of jumped in as available, but we found that the racks are nice. So we use one set of 4 per 2 courts, if that makes sense. I know that was one of the questions. So, because we have the tennis, so we have 2 courts on 1 tennis court. So we have 1 rack to kind of grab and jump in space for that when people are reserving it with that system. They put their paddles in, and then those people go out and play. They grab their paddles and play.
Yeah, I think there's no like one right amount of racks or a system to do it. I think the whiteboard can work really well. I think one thing sometimes I see missing at court facilities is a set of guidelines posted for how open play should be facilitated. Because I think without that, someone kind of fills the vacuum of information. There's either someone who sort of self-declares themselves as president of the open play, and they're starting to send, direct people around. So you can do this both in the like physical signage and digital posts. So like a location page and rec has guidelines. You can post the guidelines of how people are supposed to play open play. I think a physical sign near. So I see a lot of facilities where they have a paddle rack and then they go, here are the 5 steps of open play. First to 11, if your game is taking too long, whoever wins next point, rotate to the next court. Here's how you use the paddle rack. I think a little signage goes a long way, just making especially new people feel comfortable. I remember the first time I went up to an open play and there were 60 people who all knew each other rotating in and out of games. Like I just kind of wanted the rules or just like how the system works and how do I jump into the queue easily explained to me. So I think a little bit of signage can help as well. We have another interesting question. Brad, I see your question about the system about rec data. I can answer that to you more. That's more technical about our system. I can answer there's all kinds of ways to export data from rec. I can follow up with you. So Jennifer has a question. We just built 6 dedicated pickleball courts. Not enough, but a good start. Our supervisors want to open them to the public when we offer lessons. It's causing nastiness with our residents. How do I convince them that a program like RecTech or any sort of online system charging for passes is an answer? So maybe, Brooke, this is it sounds like you go with the passes method where you say like, okay, you're signing up for a pass to use the courts for this season of open play. What was the community response like from that? Like, did the community ask to do a pass system or like the city came up with it and then had to pitch it to the community?
I think it just came to be, because back in the day, they used to have a staff member down at the courts doing pen and paper. You had to show up and reserve the courts that way. And then I think as it got more popular, starting with tennis and then pickleball, it just came to be that, okay, we're going to keep it free for Milford residents to reserve courts, but we have to check that they're Milford residents. So at the beginning of every season, we would request proof, license, lease, anything. And then we just put them in the season pass group. So it was free to join, free to reserve, but we just maybe made it that way so we could keep that group separate. So we knew, okay, these were approved members to reserve courts.
Yeah, and I'm not sure where the conflict is coming for you and your residents, Jennifer, but I think to Brooke's point, if you lay out the eligibility rules clearly to the residents, so I'm wondering if like the conflict is, oh, if we open this to the public, people from other cities will come and the residents won't have time, is, if you're able to lay out clear eligibility rules and booking rules and actually enforce them, then the residents feel like there's fairness. So a couple things you can do, like residency check and eligibility, limiting the number of bookings per week. So you're like, look, like not only do you have to be a resident, but you can't hoard all the bookings. You can only do San Francisco is the same as Milford. It's a maximum of 3 per week, which should be plenty. And then you can come, first serve, but 3 is enough reservations. So I think if you convince the public and make the calendar transparent so they can actually see it happening in real time, it's not just a black box to them where, people are sending in forms and people are showing up. They see people teaching lessons at random times. I think transparency is the key here. It's like we clearly set the rules, we clearly enforce the rules, and the rules allow for equitable access to this court that's really in demand. I'll be honest, a lot of cities we've helped roll this out, there's always going to be naysayers who will not want anything to change. They like whatever like organic pickleball club that's come up, or they have a lot of free time, so they don't mind that it's first come, first serve and they can camp out. Usually it fizzles out after a little bit. I remember there was one launch we did for the city where there was like a mini protest of like the pickleball club when we first rolled it out. And then a month later, it's like everyone's using the booking system, no problem. So yeah, I think transparency, clear eligibility has been really successful. I don't know, like Kaz, has there been anything on the Watertown side on this, on like pushback about making things reservable?
But everything's always been reservable, at least I've been
Okay.
here and I got here in January. But like I said, it's kind of like the wild, wild west right now because we don't have an accountability system. We don't have an easy system to figure out. It's very, excuse me, it's very clunky. So, as far as, I think the question was like, how did you decide to use Rec Technologies for this? And I loved the model that you guys presented, which was the San Francisco model with like the lesson and the instructors kind of being centralized and vetted through the department and the city. Like we love that. And I call it an untapped resource, but bringing all of those people to the community as more of a formal and more transparent. I love that word, Mike, that we're going to be able to offer folks. I think people don't even realize you can reserve a tennis court. Like most, we get a lot of calls. Hey, can we reserve the tennis? I'm like, yeah, and here's where you go. Here's what you do. Now it's going to be one click. There's going to be that QR code at the facility, and that's coming out. We're rolling that out in January, but we do picnic table reservations too. So that's kind of like our big reservation system now. But we're going to be able to tap into this untapped resource of giving people accessibility to these things instead of just going, I hope no one's there when I show up.
Yeah.
That's kind of the model they use now, right? Like, and they get there and all the courts are taken. Now they're all getting back in the car and they go into another facility, another. Now they're going to be able to say, hey, I can reserve this space, even if it's $5 for an hour. And I get it when I get there. And there's no questions asked. And I think we're going to give that back to the community that they haven't had since it's just been operational here as far as people just showing up to play.
Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of that, back to Jennifer's original question, a lot of that fear comes from when you open things to the public is, well, now I'm just going to show up after work and never be able to play. If you explain to them that there's clear ads for them to have a predictable time to play, I think a lot of that fear goes away. Because otherwise to them, they're like, oh, it's just going to be Wild West. Whoever has time to camp out and hoard the court, they're going to do that. I do want to drill down a bit on the instructor question because I see it there's an anonymous question about that as well. So I'm just going to share my screen really quick to show what Kaz was referring to. So this is the landing page for San Francisco. And so the first thing we did with them was just help with the court reservations. So this is kind of straightforward. I won't linger there. But the second is on coaching. So often most cities do not have staffing to have someone down at all their racket sports courts to stop instructors from going and just bringing a hopper of balls and running their private coaching business on the court. And so this was a challenge that San Francisco came to us with. And the way we decided to help them solve it was if you gave specific users, so like, let's say authorized instructors, specific times they could self-book lesson slots, then, you've given them a legal way to do this, what was happening illegally, and they get more predictability with their business. So there has to be, honestly, a little bit of carrot and stick. The carrot here is they get dedicated time to teach. So before you have a reservation system, it's also bad for coaches, right? They might want to have a lesson with someone and they can't tell their student that we definitely have time Tuesday at 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. to have your lesson. So by giving them that predictability, it incentivizes instructors to come and actually play nice on the platform. And then, stick is if we find out you're teaching outside of those hours, we're going to take away your ability to reserve any courts, right? So this is kind of like the 3-strike rule Brooke was talking about. Like if you don't show up to your reservation, we're going to stop allowing you to have reservations because you're making this a hard system for the residents to use. So yeah, this is something we're still really experimenting with, but it is sort of like Kaz was saying, an untapped resource. It would be really hard through paper forms and phone calls to coordinate a lesson, a 1 hour lesson between an instructor and a student. But if you're able to, as a city, to set all the rules, instructors are only allowed to self-book teaching in 1 hour increments on weeknights from 2 to 7 p.m., then it takes it off your plate, right? So this is something we're really trying. We've experimented with San Francisco. We're excited to try with Watertown too. And I think it just creates new recreation opportunities outside of the traditional like leagues or group classes. Okay, so I'm looking at time here. I want to get through to the last question here and get through some Q&A. So this is a looking into the future of Parks and Rec. I'll start with you, Kaz. What do you think the next pickleball is? The next craze that's gonna sweep the nation and put similar pressures as pickleball has?
And this is like a little bit of a self promo, but I think a model like the adult recess program I brought to Littleton, which is like show up, you don't have to bring anything, you get to meet other people, and you get to play a random sport every week. We tell them what it is in advance, but it might be bowling at a bowling alley, it might be tennis at the tennis courts, it might be flag football on the turf fields, and we're just sort of like the facilitator. I know that team sports, at least in our area, is sort of dying out for adults. So I'd like to see the adult community continue to recreate, and without a team atmosphere and people unwilling to like commit to a team or unwilling to like organize a team and just make sure everybody's going to show up every week. I hope that that's kind of the model that will go under. I'd love team sports to continue to thrive, but to me, it seems like it's just been too hard for people to commit. Lives are so busy. You have kids and you're unable to do that. I was offering free childcare in Littleton to be part of that program. So I'm not sure, if that's the future, but I'd kind of like it to be, just because I feel like adults are spending less time on themselves. They're running around with their kids at different sporting events. And now that youth sports has become $1 billion industry, it's, people are spending all their weekends at, these tournaments all over the country.
Yep.
And really just sitting and watching their kids. And, adults need to recreate too. And so, I would like to see more adult programming specific for the busy adult. Does that make sense?
Yes. No, like it's more drop-in style versus or less logistics than I need to get my pickup basketball team organized. We need to sign up for 8 straight weeks of games, and you're chasing your friends to show up so you don't have to forfeit. I do love the adult sports leagues, and I think those are great, but I like the idea of more of like a lower commitment drop-in, and even paired with childcare would be really cool. So it's like you bring your kids, they can also be doing something organized while you get to play some drop-in sports. That's a cool idea. Brooke, do you have any ideas for the next rec craze?
Yeah, well, I think adult recess sounds fun. I've never heard of that, and that sounds like a great idea. I'd love to bring that to my team. I was kind of thinking about esports. I think that's been gaining popularity in the past few years. I'm not sure how much or if it will just like explode. We do partner with a esports company in Connecticut, and we offer programs like summer camps, weeknight game nights. They cover all different topics like live streaming, Fortnite, Roblox, coding and logistics of that. They do that all year round for kids, and I think that's great to have that for the kids that are interested in learning that while they're young, if they're not into baseball and basketball and other sports, that they have that access to explore their interest in the same kind of time frame, and they can go to a week-long summer camp for esports and go on a Friday night with their family to a family game night. So I think that might explode, at least in our area.
Yeah. Esports are very big, very popular. Cool. Oh, nice. We have some fans of adult recess in the Q&A. People are going to copy that idea, Kaz. It's already sweeping the nation.
That's my dream right there.
Yeah.
I'd love, anybody wants to reach out, I'd love
And
to share my model for that if they want to be part of it, for sure.
yeah, we can share if you're okay. We can send your email out afterwards if people have follow-up questions. Well, yeah,
Absolutely.
I want to wrap up on time. So thank you. I really appreciate everyone who asked questions. It's nice to sort of hear directly from the community on what people are thinking about. I hope this was helpful. If there are any follow-up questions about anything that was spoken about during the webinar, I think you should have at least one of the contact information or emails from the rec team. We'd be happy to follow up. And if there are any links out, I'm happy to send, if we do a wrap up email, I can send links on the temporary nets that worked well that we've rolled out at other gyms, like indoor spaces. I know that came up. But yeah, just want to say thank you to Kaz and Brooke for taking some time to come and share what you learned. And I hope everyone found this helpful as you build out your pickleball programs.